Hey everyone. So in this video, we're going to check out how we can use the Google Sheets integration with Canonic using workflows. And we will also create a simple front-end use case where we can easily visualize the data that we get from Google Sheets on Canonic, as well as create a form where we can easily add the data into Google Sheets. So let's get started. So first things first is we need to create a workflow to pull the data from Google Sheets. So I'm just going to call it get sheets. And this workflow is going to have the node integration. I'm going to call it get sheet data. And this is going to be Google Sheets integration. So I'm just going to use that. And the API that I want to use to get or pull the data from Google Sheets is going to be sheets.spreadsheets.values.get. Now I need to authorize my Google account. So for that, I have already created a sample spreadsheet that I'm going to use for this application. So let's sign into that account. So once your account is authorized, then we need to enter the required fields. So the first required field is the spreadsheet ID, which you can easily get from the URL of your spreadsheets on Google Spreadsheets. So we'll paste that. And the range is going to be the sheet which you want to use for the values. So we have our sheet one where we have all these values. So I'm just going to mention sheet one for the range. So let's test it out. And yeah, we get this output. So in the output, we have this values array, which has all the values coming from the spreadsheets. But you can see like the first value is like an array which has the name a Gmail, which is like the first row in our spreadsheet, and then the subsequent rows. So we need to structure it a bit better so that we can use it on our front end properly. So for that, I'm going to create an output node and I'm going to call it sheet data, and the output key is going to be data. So over here, we'll just have to write some code to restructure the data. So the first thing that we need to do is we get the rows from params one dot values, and then we get the keys, which is like the zeroth index. So these keys are basically like the columns, which is like the first row in my spreadsheet, and then the result array, which I'm going to send in, is going to be rows dot slice one because I want to slice it from the first index, and I'm going to map for each row. So I'm going to create like an object, and for each key that I have, which is like for each column that I have, I'm going to take the key and the index, and the object for that key is going to be the row index. And then I'm just going to return the object. And finally, I'm going to return the result array. So this is basically just some restructuring that I'm doing for the output so that I get an array of objects in the form of like name, Shomik, age 21, and email shomik@gmail.com. So if I want to get it in this output, I have to restructure it like this. And yeah, now let's test it out. So yeah, we now get this data output in this format. Cool. Now let's also create the second workflow, which is going to be to add data to Google Sheets, which is to push data. So I'm just going to call it add sheet. Now this is also going to be an integration. Call it add sheet. I'm going to choose the Google Sheets integration. And from here, I'm going to choose the append to spreadsheet API. Again, it is authorized. And in the required fields, I need to choose the spreadsheet ID again. And inside of range, I need to choose, like specify what will be the range for my spreadsheet. So if you just go through the Google Sheet documentation, you will understand this better. But basically, we need to mention the columns after which the datas need to get entered. So we want to mention that our data needs to only be from column A to C, and we have to mention that it's going to be for sheet one. So let's just mention the range like that. And now in the optional tab, we have to mention some values. So include value in response is going to be true, and the value input option is going to be raw, so that it ends like it enters the value row wise. Now the main important for thing for the add to sheet integration is going to be the values input. So this is like the values array which is going to contain all the values that we want to enter for our spreadsheet. So this is going to come dynamically from our API in the request body. So let's just call it input.data because we're going to get it from the input. And let's also mention the data over here, which is going to be JSON. And let's test it out. So the data is going to have a double array like this because like the Google Sheets append to sheet API accepts the values in this format. So let's do test user 19 and test3gmail.com. So let's run the workflow. So the output was successful, and if you see in the sheet as well, this data got appended. So this is working fine. But if we just want to keep this data in like a more structured manner, so that once we submit the form from our front end, it comes in the form of JSON, which is why I also added the data in the form of JSON here. So in order to do that, I'm just going to add like a node in between, which is going to be like a simple function node, which is going to structure the data, the user data in a better form. So I'm just going to go delete and it in between. So this is going to be like a function node, and this I'm going to call structure user data. Let's expand that. So here I just want to get the user data from the input, and I want to destructure the name, email, and the age from the user data, and then send the resultant array of arrays, form of name, age, and email. So make sure this format is the same as the format over here. And yeah, that's it. So whatever output we are sending from this function, we then need to use it in our integration. So if we just go to the optional tab, so instead of input.data, uh, it's going to be one dot output. One because we are basically getting the output from the first node. So it follows zero-based indexing. So the output from the first node, which is this function node, we want to get the output. So let's test it out. So our data is going to be in the form of JSON like that. Ravi, age is going to be 24, and email Ravi and age. Cool. Let's run the workflow. So yeah, our data got appended. So cool, our workflows are working fine. Now let's quickly create the front-end pages for our application. So I'm going to go to pages, create the page called dashboard. And I'm just going to bring in a table component real quick. And the roles in this table component are going to come from the sketch sheets workflow and then the data. So this is all the data. I want to generate the columns from this data. So you can even change the labels and generate the columns. Cool. So our table is ready with all the data that coming from our Google spreadsheet. Now let's also create a simple form. So I'm going to choose the form component, and this form component is going to have the name, email, and the age. So the key is going to be age, type is going to be number, and we already have the email key and the name key from before. So now let's create a handler. So it will trigger on submit for the form, and the action is going to be execute a workflow. And the workflow that we want to execute is add sheet. So if we just configure the input and we want to get all the values from the form, and yeah, so like let's say if I enter some values over here, you should be able to see it here. Cool. Now once the workflow is executed, I want to show an alert that the user has been added. So I can add the alert message user added. And last thing, I also want to refresh the table component so that it can refresh and get the newly added user. Cool. So now let's quickly test our application. So if I enter some test user, I'll just call it test user 2 and the age 32. So if I click on option, the user has been added. And yeah, you see that the user also got added to our Google spreadsheet. So yeah, that's how easy it is to pull data from Google Spreadsheets as well as push data into a Google spreadsheet. I hope you like this video and thank you for watching.